what an amazing panel to have in this room. So I sense we're going to have a very good discussion here. So thank you all for taking the time to join. So the question is levelling up. Pretty big as a question, but we heard yesterday from the Chancellor, levelling up is net zero is levelling up. So what a brilliant day to have this panel. How we're going to run this is we're going to ask each of the panellists for their views. So we'll go left to right, and then we will hear a few minutes from each that will begin to set the scene. We'll then go into a few questions from me, and then we will go into the room itself. And I'm sure you've got all your questions ready, and if you haven't, get thinking. So I'm going to hand to Lord Houchen. He's very kindly said I can call him Ben, so thank you, Ben. But Ben, it's brilliant to have you here, and thank you very much. An enormous set of announcements yesterday, but will have a huge impact on this region. So thank you for making the time. So we'll kick off with you, if that's okay. A few minutes on levelling up and net zero and what it means to you.
No, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, and you can call me Ben because that's my name, so it always goes down quite well. Yesterday was really a building upon what we started 5 or 6 years ago now. And when you have a region like Teesside that historically and sadly is quite typical of a post-industrial area that has been in decline for many decades now. When devolution arrived in 2017, where there were some powers and some money given back to us to be able to control locally, albeit it's never enough, is it? We want more powers and more control. But when we were given that opportunity, it's allowed us to address some of those issues that we've all known about in this region for ourselves, rather than it being dealt with by well-intentioned and well-meaning ministers and civil servants in London. And when we started out, when I was elected in 2017, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying we're going to do something completely different, we're going to compete with London on financial services, or we're going to compete with Silicon Valley for the next Instagram, what we did is we built on what we already had. We looked at the incredible chemical and processing industry that we've had for a long, long time. We looked at the inheritance of infrastructure around the river, around the former steelworks, and we looked at how we could build upon that to pivot rather than start all over again from an area that was proudly making iron and steel going back to the early 1800s, ICI, the first modern chemical plant built in 1947. How do we use those assets to be future-proofing ourselves for a different economy, that net zero economy that's driving actually not just government policy anymore, but the markets are now overtaking in large part, I think, government policy. And a couple of things came to mind. One of them was in aviation. Some people in this room might know that I'm quite keen on airports. And a lot of people ask me, well, how is that compatible with us got to talk about Teesside Airport at every opportunity. But you've got to have, people ask me, well, how do you have this net zero drive when, you're promoting aviation, which is kind of, carbon intensive and it's not good for the environment? Whereas actually those two things come together. So if you look, for example, at the Net Zero Teesside project, with BP and Equinor, if you go over to the former Redcar Steelworks site now, you'll see works going on in preparation for that starting construction next year. The carbon that will be captured from that and the hydrogen that will be produced by BP H2 Teesside, the blue hydrogen project that was approved as well as part of the NZT project, will come together. And there are companies like, for example, Willis Aviation, who have got a joint venture with Mitsui Bank, who will be taking that carbon and taking that hydrogen and combining it to make sustainable aviation fuel, which means that we can make aviation more sustainable. And again, that's using our natural assets. It's using the assets we have in people and the skills and expertise that we have. And I remember going to, sadly, I was dragged along to an aviation conference, much more boring than this. This is a whole different scale. And I recognised that you were sat in front of the chief commercial officer at EasyJet or the chief exec at British Airways, and they were talking about decarbonisation. But to be frank, those industries aren't going to do it. It's places like Teesside and Humberside and HyNet in the northwest that are going to deliver the key decarbonisation. Why would the chief exec, for example, of an airline be concerned about how fuel is made? That's not what their job is. Their job is to fly people around, get them around. And it's the processing industry that should be driving that. So we took those component parts. And what's really interesting, where we've made progress, where, for example, if you look at the Humber hasn't been able to make progress, I think a couple of things are involved. I think three main things. Number one, the Humber project is much more spread out than the Teesside project. Teesside is a much more condensed area that is better connected by the infrastructure that we have, making it easier for some of those projects to get away. So there's a look of inheritance of infrastructure and natural geography, which makes it slightly easier. The second thing I think is devolution. I mean, I speak to investors on a daily basis across all industries, and the one thing they get very frustrated about in the Humber is that there is no one person to go and speak to. You know, it's that thing, you know, if you want to call Europe, who do you pick up the phone to? It's a bit like that in the Humber. Do you go to, you know, a local council? Do you go to the local MP? That is a problem for investors where devolution doesn't exist, but particularly for a place like Humber when you compare it with Teesside, because they can come and speak to me, my organisation, my team, and that's a single door that they can get through. And I think that has slowed down some of their progress. But on the other side of that, it's accelerated what we can do. And then I would say the final aspect of what we're able to achieve is that largely, actually because of devolution, we identified some significant market failures where devolution was able to insert itself to release private sector investment. So if you look, for example, at the offshore wind sector, the government have been talking about offshore wind for decades now, going back actually to the last Labour government, and they've never been able to find a way of putting the infrastructure in to be able to attract the private investment. Because if you're going to build blades or monopiles or turbines, the infrastructure and the quay and all of that good stuff has to exist before an investor's going to commit. But nobody's going to build a new quay and the infrastructure that's needed unless they know that they've got a tenant or somebody who's going to put product over that quay. So there is a genuine market failure actually in large parts of the country when it comes to offshore wind. And we were able to secure some funding and some support from the government, which allowed us to build the new quay at South Bank on the Teesworks site, which directly led to the delivery of Cllr Wind, the world's largest monopile factory, creating 2,000 jobs. So there is a moment in time that's happening in Teesside that means various things are coming together, some by luck, some by design, some by assistance from government and local decisions that are being made. But it's true to say that what we're starting to deliver over the last 5 or 6 years is UK leading. And not only is it UK leading, we are the recipient, and we are welcoming on an almost weekly basis governments from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Japan, France, Germany, who are all coming to Teesside to look at these world-leading projects, trying to find out how are we doing it, in what way are we doing it, and how can they learn from us to be able to take those technologies abroad. So it's a very different place than we've been in over the last 5 to 10 years compared to where we were before that. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. But the opportunities for us as a government, through devolution, working with local councils to put the right building blocks in place and resolve some of those market failures are what are going to drive the future economy. And it's that type of thinking that you need if you're going to get CCUS, hydrogen, offshore wind, gigafactories, nuclear, dare I even say it. You need those in the mix to be able to make sure that we can deliver on this economy that, like I say, actually I think government policy is getting a little bit slower than it has been over the last 10 years. It's been very, very good, but actually now the market's taking over, and I think we need to be more innovative and we need to be more reactive because the market's taking over and we need to make sure that regulation and support can stay the pace with where the private sector currently are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben. So turning to you, Alex, What do you think of the remarks you've heard and some of the themes that we've been discussing since your arrival around the pace of change and the opportunity for the region?
Sure, well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for inviting me along, and thank you to National Gas. I spent 17 years of my career in the gas industry, and it was a good time, and I enjoyed it, and great people working within the industry. And if I look a little dishevelled or a little red or whatever, just bear in mind I've been dealing with a certain local difficulty. But let me assure you that Stockton is the best place in Britain to live. It most certainly is. And I think that's something that Ben actually agrees with from comments that he's been making on that certain little local difficulty as well. So I'm grateful for that. Looking forward, Ben we actually agree on all manner of things. People think that all we do is fight each other and criticise each other. But the things that Ben has described are the things that we believe in as well. We believe in carbon capture and storage, and I set up the all-party parliamentary group on carbon capture, use and storage some 9 years ago, I think it was, before it became fashionable to talk about carbon capture, use and storage. And it's just wonderful to see the journey that it's taken, although, of course, we've had quite a few hefty bumps in the road in actually getting to where we are today. But, of course, Teesside is the place for that to happen. No doubt about it. And when industrialists come to see me, that's what they want to do. They want to be able to invest here on Teesside, but they want the right business environment in order to do that. They want quick decision making. The greatest frustration that industries face today is the slow pace of decision making. And I know there can be reasons for that, but we really need to crack on and get those decisions taken. I mean, we talk about the carbon capture and use and storage project, but it hasn't actually been totally finalised yet. We actually need that decision. We need to understand the contracts. We need to understand how it's actually going to work. And that's what the companies out there want as well. But people talk very much about levelling up, and there's all manner of things that affect levelling up. And hopefully, if we do see the economy built here, it will have a knock-on effect for the people in our community, because we've got to also ensure that our people benefit from anything that actually happens as far as development is concerned. But we also have to try our best to try and make it a level, I hate the expression, I'm going to use it anyway, the level playing field for British industry. I was with Tom Crotty. I was at the Chemical Industries Association annual dinner last week. And Tom was talking about the level of investment in chemicals in this country. It is 1% of what is actually invested in China. It's 4% of what is actually invested in the USA and in Europe. So we've got a long way to go, and yet we have one of the most vibrant chemical industries in the world, and yet we're not getting that level of investment. So I'm hoping the things that we're doing, hopefully together on Teesside, will actually result in more of that investment coming in. But there's also the issue of costs related to a lot of our industries. Now, I made a few notes, and according to the UK Steel Report, industrial electricity prices are 86% higher in the UK than in France and Germany. That's not good enough, is it? It's a tremendous difference and puts our companies at a disadvantage. We talk about gas. We're still paying double the price of what it is in the US. And we have an example in my constituency, two examples actually. Mitsubishi, the Castle Works, and the CF Fertilizer ammonia plant both closed down because of the high cost of energy. It's cheaper for CF Fertilizers to import ammonia all the way from the United States than it is to manufacture it in Bellingham. And that's because of energy prices. So we've really got to address that. Ben talked about our local authorities, and long before we had a mayor, our local authorities were working very closely together. There was a combined authority, and they were working, but it needed to be supercharged. And I think the election, the appointment of a mayor for the area has helped to do that. I believe that the local authorities have been working very well together. But of course now we need to see some of the returns from all that working. Ben talked that, we've been talking about this for 5 or 6 years ago, about all the jobs that's going to be created. But we know that, those jobs have not yet been landed. They're not actually, we haven't actually got dates for them to be on site, but we really do need to land those jobs sooner rather than later. So my offer to all of you is that, or my statement to all of you is, we want to work together. We believe that we'll be in government within a year, so it's all the more important that we work across political divides and ensure that we do the best for the Tees Valley. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. And you raised a really important point around CCS, and you are sat next to the most, I think, informed participant in the CCS market. So, Ruth, that's really a nice segue to you to kind of share some of your thoughts around the region and the importance of CCS and levelling up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of us here want to get to net zero as quickly as possible, but we all know that can't be achieved by just deindustrializing. That is not the future that we want for this country. It's not what we want for our regions. CCUS is one of the solutions to process emissions from heavy industry, also to being able to continue to use some liquid fuels as part of this transition, and also to enable the production of hydrogen at industrial scale that is required for fuel switching from heavy industry. CCS can also be used to decarbonise gas-fired power stations, to provide flexible backup for renewables. In fact, it's essential, and the Climate Change Committee said that we would need kind of around 10 of those stations around the UK in order to get to a 70% renewable electricity system. But I think what we're all talking about is the other bit of energy, and many people don't think about that. our energy use is only about 30% electricity. The other bit is the liquid fuels, the gas. And yes, we produce hydrogen at the moment. We just let those emissions into the atmosphere. We can add carbon capture and storage to that and have clean hydrogen, which can be used to create those very high temperatures needed for most of our industrial processes. So this is really an essential technology. It's kind of part of creating the materials and products that we all wear. Our clothes are made of byproducts of petroleum. Our medicines, lots of products that we use, all made in our refineries around the UK, most of them at the coast, where they've got access to ports, they've got access to infrastructure. And for that reason, actually, because we have such a wealth of geology in the North Sea and the East Irish Sea all around the UK, where we can store that carbon dioxide, which is now a waste product that we want to get rid of. Because of that, and it being so close to these big industrial centres like we have in the northeast and around the country, we can actually take that CO2, and it's not too far to actually take that and put that under the seabed. And Norway's been doing this for 20 years. We could have been already doing this for 10 years, but as Alex said, there's been fits and starts. I think there was a competition when I first worked in government to do this in 2007-8. That was cancelled in 2010. There was another competition launched in 2011. That was cancelled in 2015. So it's third time lucky now. And what's been happening over the last sort of 10 years, the industry hasn't just been licking its wounds and sort of sitting around idle. What's happened is that through each stage of trying to get carbon capture and storage going in the UK, a lot has been learned, and industry pioneers, many of them in this region, have been looking at how can we do this as efficiently as possible, as economically as possible. And what they've done is they've come together through also support of the IDC programme, which was a great programme to bring regions together, all the end user businesses together, to look at how they could jointly share CO2 networks, bring the costs down, how they can get to net zero industrial regions using CCUS, hydrogen, also wind and all other things as well. So those plans, the cluster plans, I think have been really, really good. What's really essential is the cluster programme that the government is driving forward, which is driving forward net zero Teesside, all the projects here that Ben mentioned. I think pace is really important here though. We are amongst the world's leaders, but the biggest announcement at our conference actually a couple of weeks ago, which was we had people from around the world. We had people from Japan, Australia, US, Canada, across Europe. But the big announcement really was actually that the Porthos cluster in the Netherlands took its final investment decision. We were all really delighted about that. They'd seen a lot of delays through their regulation and permitting of their capture plants. Delays that we hope won't happen here, and we hope we can learn from what they've gone through. But, you know, we could have had a cluster final investment decision in the UK on a similar timescale, but we've seen successive delays. So I think where we are now is really focused on getting those first FIDs, final investment decisions, on the 8 projects, which are in the 2 clusters. So here in the northeast, the net zero Teesside and other projects, and in the northwest in HyNet, because this really, everybody's watching this, not just everyone around the world, but everybody in this industry, the CCUS industry, who are trying to get clusters going all around the UK. There are 12 hubs of emitters or clusters involving CO2 stores offshore around the UK. They're all watching to see if the business models, if the contracts, if the regulations, if the Energy Act passed recently, which we really welcome, but if those work and if the government can actually get a price that works and get these things built. So everyone's watching that. But importantly, I think it's the industrial end users. Many of them are joining the CCSA. Every week we have a new joiner, whether that's kind of refineries, energy from waste, cement plants, lime production, people in Derbyshire. No one can see a pathway for their business without these networks, whether those are CO2 networks, hydrogen networks. Most of these clusters are going to need both. And they need a plan for those, and they need to see how over the next 10 years, between now and 2035, those networks are going to expand and grow and finally reach where their industry is. And this is really, I think, what Jake's talking about. How do we repurpose what we've got, make the most use of that as well? Recycle what we have, the skills and capability we already have, but also how do we kind of plan how to expand those networks over time? And I think it just comes back to what we said before. It's, you can't have a strategy for net zero without having an industrial strategy. And you can't have an industrial strategy without having an industrial decarbonisation plan. And that's really, I think, the gap that I see. And we're really hoping that the CCUS vision, which is coming out later this year, we understand from the government, will start to address this and really show a plan for the whole UK. Because without that, investors in our industrial regions are going to be concerned about making plans for the future. So the flip side of that is there is so much opportunity, not just to secure the jobs that are here now. We think that between now and 2030, if we went really quickly with the CO2 and hydrogen networks, we could actually secure around 70,000 jobs by 2030. Even if that was between now and 2035, I still think that would be a really, really good achievement. But in addition, there are businesses that are desperate to locate themselves, new green businesses, making new recycled or really innovative products from feedstocks for the building sector to decarbonise other sectors of the economy. Fuels, as Ben said. These businesses, they can go anywhere. They're floating around looking for which country is going to offer them the quickest access to a CO2 network or a hydrogen network or both. We actually surveyed them, and we think that we can get another sort of 77,000 jobs, new jobs in regions, both building this infrastructure on existing sites, but also from new sites coming in. The problem is our survey also said that a third of those projects really are at risk and they really could go anywhere. And so the opportunity is there, but I think the window is closing to really provide that plan and make sure we secure that investment in the UK in regions like this and around the country.
Ruth, what a call to action. It feels like the next 12 months are critical for so much, and they really are. I know when our CEO, John Butterworth, is with his European counterparts, they all say, you've got this amazing jewel in the crown of Europe, which is the North Sea, on your doorstep. Why are you not connecting to it? So lots to do, and hopefully we'll explore a bit of that. Thank you. Amanda, you cover a huge amount. You have many activities within your remit, and we brought you here today because you're going to be able to bring a really quite unique view on what this means for your region and what this means for skills and levelling up. And it'd be good to hear some opening thoughts from you, please.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. So as a non-Teesside representative on this panel, I almost feel a bit outnumbered. So I'm here to represent the rest of the North East, in effect. And one of the key points I want to pick up from this and what I've heard and what I've seen in the last 2.5 years of leading Durham County Council is that the rest of the North East are 6 to 8 years behind where Teesside is. And that's because politics got in the way. And it was politics in one party, not even wider politics. So the lesson I think we can learn from today, is not to let politics get in the way of getting to this carbon neutral and getting to net zero. Because that's what we've heard is we change policy, we put someone else new in, it's a different idea, we go back to square one. And that is so important because actually the end goal here is much more important than that. And I believe devolution is a way to achieve that. And I've seen what's happened in Teesside, we see what happens in Manchester, and I look forward to that for the North East because the role of a mayor is not diluted by having to provide all the other services that a council leader does. So Ben doesn't have to be concerned about delivering the rest of the public services, making sure looked after children are looked after, our adults are looked after. But that doesn't mean to say that councils don't have a huge role to play within this, because even as individual councils, they've done a lot of work to get to the point that they are now. And we can just add to that with the creation of a mayoral combined authority for the Greater North East, which will be the 4th biggest mayoral combined authority in the country with 2 million residents. And it will be unique because a huge proportion of it is rural, and there isn't really any mayoral combined authority in existence now that has that level of rurality and coast. So it's going to be a leader within England as to how that works and how they bring that together with the cities, and we make sure that no community and no industry is left behind. And Jake's just mentioned the North Sea. There's a huge amount of the North Sea between Cunnigham and Berwick, and that's a massive coastline that we'll also be able to work with. So I think we have huge opportunities now as a North East as a whole for both Teesside and the rest of the North East to work together to achieve things for our communities, for the country as a whole. But we've got to stand above what is differences and work together for the greater good, because that is so much more important for our generations to come, for our children, for our grandchildren, that we've got something to leave them, something that they can work with, and a much better lifestyle and community and business. So in County Durham, some of the things that we've been doing, some of you may or may not know that we bid for the City of Culture in 2025. We weren't successful, but we did get to the final 4. And one of our big projects was Black to Green, and it's working on the heritage that we have of our coal mines in the North East and turning that into green energy. So Mark, who's one of my cabinet members, mentioned before, and we've had visitors there up to Darlington to look at how we're using the coal mines that are still in existence, still below the ground, to produce the hot water and the heat pumps to manage whole housing estates. So we need to look at how we work with our heritage. Don't forget our history, don't lose it, but embrace it and take it forward. And that's how we'll take our communities with us. We need to make sure that everyone buys into this. It's no good going to people and telling them this is happening to you. We need to take them with us on the journey, make sure they're embraced in it and see the benefits, because it will be there for us all to look back on and think, you know what, we were part of that. We made sure that the North East was a better place for our children to grow up, for businesses to come to, and for people to prosper. Because for too long, we've been the bottom of the economic pile, and there's only us can turn it round. And without wanting to offend anyone, I'm not particularly over-enamoured with the word levelling up right now. I don't like the competition where that things are done, because we've seen far too much money spent on something that had no outcomes in terms of being awarded funding, because we need to make sure that the funding is scarce. It needs to be diverted in the right way to make sure that these communities do benefit from that. And we need to have much more. And I have just been to a conference where I did tell the Secretary of State just that we need to change the wording unless we really mean it, because we can't have a wording like levelling up when our most deprived communities in the country have not been awarded any funding, because that doesn't work. So we do need to look at how we put this out and how we engage with people.
Thank you, Amanda, for a very important set of views. And I think what we'd all agree with is that we all want what's right. So it was great to hear the purpose that you spoke of. So thank you. But you did also say that you don't want to let politics get in the way. And our next speaker, Lord Callanan, of course, representative of the government. So, Lord Callanan, you've heard some very diverse sets of views. We've heard from Ben on devolution, how we make this a world-leading region. We've gone into Alex and the pace of decision-making from the government. Ruth has spoken to us about how, arguably internationally, we could be slightly behind here. And then Amanda has taken us through a very important and real set of examples on how we make sure this actually impacts lives and people. So So I'm going to ask you to summarise all of that, if that's okay, with some of your thoughts.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jay. Firstly, to reassure Amanda, she's not the only non-Teessider on the panel. I'm even further north as a Geordie coming here, but obviously my role at the moment is in national government. And the exciting thing about working in national government on these areas, obviously I have to be relatively neutral, and there are other parts of the country as well that benefit from many of these processes. But it's the exciting opportunities that exist for the North generally, and I mean the North as in we would understand the North. It's amazing. There are many of my civil servants. They say, "Well, tomorrow, Minister, you're going up to the North, to Birmingham." I mean, that's not the North as far as I'm concerned. And but the country does have a very London-centric view of the world, particularly in government. But the great thing about the clean energy revolution is that it is the North that is benefiting and taking advantage of it. So, the two first CCUS hydrogen clusters that Ruth talked about are in the Northwest, and the East Coast cluster here on Teesside, from the region that originated the first industrial revolution that powered the rest of the UK from coal and steel, to be at the forefront of the green industrial revolution. I think is a really powerful thing. And I take on board Alex's criticism. Of course, he's right. At the moment, a lot of it is just talk. There's a lot of in government. We're really good at strategies and intimating where we want to do things, but it's taking time to deliver. But I can reassure him in that we are getting on with it. So to take some examples, Ruth mentioned CCS. We have started the negotiation process with the first 8 capture projects. We will be awarding contracts Q3 next year at the latest. And there's a considerable amount of public money involved here. There's a lot of detailed negotiations. Obviously, they're private companies. They want to try and extract the maximum value from the taxpayer they can. We want to get the best value from the point of view of the taxpayer. So the detailed, hard negotiations going on, but we're very confident that we will be able to reach agreement, and those projects can then take the final investment decisions and start delivering. Literally in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be letting the first what I call hydrogen allocation round contracts. So this is a whole series of projects in this region and across the country where we will be committing, again, considerable sums of money over a 15-year contract period to actually start producing clean electrolytic hydrogen to hopefully feed into Jake's project Union when that finally comes into operation as well. And again, the North will be at the forefront of these policies. The opportunities that exist, and Ben talked about the great advantages of offshore wind. The UK is a world leader in offshore wind. We have the first, second, third, and fourth largest wind farms in the world. Sadly, on a national capacity, China has just overtaken us as the biggest provider, but we're certainly very much the leaders in Europe. And to some extent, we're actually having the problems of success because the rollout of offshore wind has been so successful, the prices have come right down, that everybody else in Europe wants to do the same thing. And so there's massive pressure on the supply chains, which is why we need to get more of them established in the UK. And we want to try and avoid the mistakes, in inverted commas, that were made with offshore wind, and a lot of the supply chains were based overseas, and get as much as possible, we can't specify it legally, but as much as possible of the supply chains for hydrogen, for CCS within the UK, using our offshore expertise, using our fantastic chemical and engineering expertise that we have. But Alex's challenge is right. We will be starting to deliver hydrogen projects literally in the next few weeks. CCS projects will take final investment decisions next year. We will launch the Track 1 expansion process, as it's known, expanding the existing CCS clusters to see what other projects can also come on board within those. And then we will expand it further to the Track 2 process, which is Humberside and Acorn in Scotland, because the North Sea has provided us with our energy supplies for the last few decades. It can continue to do that through offshore wind, through CCS as well. Fantastic engineering projects and potential. There is considerable sums of government money being invested in these areas. Of course, asking me as a minister, I'd always like more money to invest in these areas, but public spending is tight. We have to negotiate with the Treasury to get all funds that we can. But you've heard of examples from Amanda and others of the way that renewable heating is being rolled out across the region. We're using mine water heating schemes that you mentioned in Houchen. There's also another great example in Gateshead. Heat networks will be another key weapon in our armoury of delivering decarbonisation of heating systems. So there's a huge amount going on. It really will contribute to the levelling up agenda, which I see very much as bringing back to the former glory the industrial heartlands of the UK, which certainly I'm proud to come from. And it's one of the roles that I see as a minister is to advance the cause of in particular the North East, if I'm allowed to be a little bit biased in my role in government.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lord Callanan. So we'll start with one question from my side, and that will hopefully get things going on the panel. Fantastic reflections from everyone, and then we'll open up to the room, so make sure you've been thinking of your questions so that you're ready to have sort of 20 hands shoot up at once. So Ben, I'm going to ask if you can answer my first question, which I'll open with. So we heard from Peter this morning, who was a great advocate for the region and why Darlington is the place to be, and a good solid thumbs up. And you mentioned a really interesting point about there being one person to speak to, ideally. So if I am a large investor or institutional investor, I'm looking where to place my capital, I'm looking at the range of projects that Ruth's members can deliver. What do you think has made Teesside a great place to make that happen? And what more could we be doing to really attract international capital to this region?
There's a group of things that I think have come together to make something relatively unique of what we're going through. So one of the questions I always ask my team to ask themselves whenever we're developing projects is why? And a key thing is, if you look at CCUS, and particularly, I mean, one of the most important things about these renewable projects is you're basically funding it with globally mobile capital that can go anywhere in the world. And they can take their pick, actually, of a number of projects. Already they're at different speeds in relation to delivery. So when you're looking at a place like Teesside, it's like, well, why would anybody come here? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. Why would they come here? So you've got to build a picture of not just actually competing with the Humber or the Northwest, but these are guys and women running companies in Europe, the Far East, the Middle East, North America, who can take their pick of anywhere they want to go. So you've got to build up a picture for an investor. You've got to think like an investor and say, well, why would they pick us? Particularly given some of the challenges around energy costs and some of the regulatory challenges that we have in the UK. And one of the things that we've been able to do is build that picture. So if you take the former Redcar Steelworks site, if you look at Teesworks, for instance, one of the things that we say is it's the largest brownfield site in Western Europe, which is objectively true if anybody wants to go and check that. But it's not unique in and of itself. You know, there are bigger sites in the Middle East and in Africa and North America and the Far East, right? So it's not unique. So these investors from all over the world could go elsewhere. It's nice to have, but it's not unique. But then when you pair it with, again, as I talked about earlier, the look of geography, which is we've got the deepest river on the east coast of the United Kingdom. And you can go quite far up the River Tees, even where it gets a bit shallower, down to kind of 13 and a half metres, which actually in relative terms is very, very deep. So when you look at a river with that kind of depth and you pair it with that kind of landmass, that single landmass right next door, it starts to become interesting. But again, there are deeper rivers across Europe and across the world. So again, not unique in and of itself. The two other things that then I think do really make it unique and start to make it a proposition that invariably when anybody, particularly big investors, manufacturing investors, are looking at Europe and they lump the UK in with Europe, we tend to be on the short list of 3 or 5 sites that they're looking at in the UK. One is the Freeport. Freeports are great, but again, in and of themselves, there are better Freeports around the world. There are better models that go much further than we have, and we probably should go a lot further. But again, when you pair that with landmass and river, that starts to be unique. And then the final thing that I think is probably arguably the most important, but certainly if not the most equally important with a couple of the others, is the fact that over the last 5-6 years, we've built a fantastic relationship with Redcar and Cleveland Council. Because when we set up the development corporation in Redcar, we didn't take planning powers that we could have done as part of the setup of the development corporation. We left them with the council. And we did that because we were all completely aligned on trying to regenerate a site and bring jobs and investment back to that region. the thing that made the big difference is working with the council, the development corporation got approval for 14.5 million square feet of manufacturing space. So the Cllr is the example. Why did they come here? You got 100 acres of land. Well, how many hundreds of acres do you want? Tick. You know, we're trying to build the world's largest monopile factory, so we need a depth of 13.5 metres minimum. Well, there you go, tick. You know, you've got free port benefits, which means that actually I think you can start to argue we are kind of on parity with our European partners when it comes to exports, which obviously that export market is there. But then the most important thing for them was speed to market. So I remember sitting next to Houchen, the chief executive of Cllr, at a dinner in London back in January of 2021. And I've got to give thanks to the government because I assume on purpose, purposely sat me next to him at this dinner. And he was complaining that their original idea was to go to the Humber. And he was complaining that they'd been talking to the Humber for a couple of years. They'd not made any progress. They couldn't get any commitments. They couldn't move it forward. And so I said, well, why don't you come to Teesside and have a look? And by the way, and we had a bit of a chat at dinner. We brought his team up literally a week later in January. And by July of the same year, they'd actually put a spade in the ground to start building their factory. Because we turned around to them and said, well, we've already got planning. We're building the new quay. So if you go and put your reserve matters in for the design of your actual facility, you can start building in less than 12 weeks. And we always say, we will have the permissions in place long before you're ready to contract and start building. The biggest challenge we had was making them believe us. And we did. Like I say, within 6 months, actually 4 or 5 months, they started building. And that's now starting to happen with others. So you create a momentum where you package something up. And the biggest thing you've got that sits alongside all of that is you've got to give confidence to an investor that you will actually deliver. And let's be honest, right? Not many private investors have huge amounts of faith in the public sector, not just national government, local government. They just do. They see it as quite slow, quite pedantic. They see it as overly prescriptive. And whenever I speak to an investor, and I think it's probably fair to say anybody in this panel has done it, they're all building at least 18 months into their timeframes for getting planning, particularly for a building that's going to be 500,000 or 1 million square feet. They think the timeline is going to be huge. And that causes them a major problem for wanting to come to the UK. So the reason we've been able to be so successful is thinking like investors, trying to move all of the obstacles out the way, and just basically go with the attitude that if somebody wants to go and spend tens, if not hundreds, or sometimes billions of pounds on Teesside, why would we want to get in the way of that? You know, it's them taking the risk. So how do we help build the environment to make sure that they can do it, and they can do it successfully? And that's how we've always approached it. I think the way that we can do more is, to some extent, largely out of our hands. I think it's a government issue around, as I said very briefly in my opening remarks, we're now seeing that the success, particularly of the UK in that narrative of driving towards net zero, you know, the 2050 target, it's set an expectation within the market that the UK is/was world leading. And now market expectations are much outstripping the regulation that's in place. And I think we've got a potential problem. It's not a problem yet, but there is a potential problem that the government doesn't put in the frameworks and the regulations, and therefore the certainty to allow final investment decisions to be taken by all different kinds of businesses that are ready to go, where the government haven't even started thinking about regulation in a certain type of field. So, you know, that's the biggest concern. And the final example I would give of that, because I'm sure it'll come up at some point, is nuclear. You know, there are a number of small nuclear reactor companies that want to build a number of nuclear reactors on Teesside that we're speaking to right now. One of them, I think we'll be announcing in the not too distant future of their intent. Their biggest issue isn't finance. You know, they don't need Great British Nuclear. They don't need this government competition that's being run to mass subsidise one of the first ones. They've got the money because, again, the market's overtaking where governments are, not just in the UK, but across the globe on this. Their issue is regulatory certainty about how do you license new SMR sites and what is the process they can go through, and will government let them go through that process? That's the biggest obstacle to what I think is the panacea of clean energy and nuclear, and that is a government obstacle because government just haven't got their heads around, because government just assume any new technology must require subsidy. But the way that the markets are moving at the minute, the money's there. And I've been saying this in Teesside for a long time. Money is no longer an issue for a place like Teesside. It's landing the right projects and doing what you can to make them come here rather than go elsewhere.
Very clear, Ben. Very clear on the local strategy, but enabled nationally. Any reflections from the panel before?
I just pick up one of Ben's point, which I think was actually critically important. That's the issue of planning. It's one of the, I also have responsibility for planning of energy infrastructure, and it's one of my biggest frustrations how long it takes to do anything in the UK. And it's actually not just a problem that we have. If you talk to our counterparts in Germany, on the continent, etc., we've built in so many regulations and frameworks and protections and cross issues within the planning regulatory framework that it becomes almost impossible to do anything. And I can absolutely testify to Ben's thing. Like, telling a big international company that you can get permission within 2 or 3 months to do something, I can well believe that he wouldn't have believed you, because it takes many years. Even to build offshore wind turbines, you would have thought relatively uncontroversial. Every one of them almost now. We've got a current judicial review going on to people that will challenge because it might affect the environment of a few seabirds or something. And they're important. I'm not minimizing the importance of them. But, in national government, you're often faced with a choice. I feel like saying to these protesters and objectors, if you don't want offshore wind turbines to provide your electricity, tell me what you would like to provide you with your power to run your home and your business, because the choice is coal-fired power plants or hydro plants or nuclear plants or gas-fired plants. If we'd have a modern industrialized country that needs power, it's about a trade-off between, nothing is environmentally perfect. Nothing will produce a perfect outcome. It's all about trade-offs. And so one of the projects that we're looking at from a national government point of view is how can we get through a lot of these regulatory planning obstacles? How can we reduce the number of judicial reviews that are going on? So I think in Sizewell, which is obviously the nuclear power plant in Suffolk, I think we're on our 3rd judicial review now of campaigners that have taken to court, and each one of them has won. The government's won the case at the cost of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in legal fees, but we win the cases. But it adds a year to 18 months on every challenge. And this is in an area that already has a nuclear power plant there, which has a reasonable degree of consumer and public support around it. But there is always a minority of people that will object and will use the processes of the planning applications and lobby local councils and lobby government and then lobby the courts to try and get things stopped. So the challenge of planning and regulatory approval in a relatively crowded island is a great one. And the other issue that we're facing at the moment is, even if we get permission, of course, for these offshore wind turbines, and we already have lots, but get more, of course, we need infrastructure onshore to increase the capacity of the electricity grid. That requires more overhead pylons. It requires converter stations. And the great thing about regions like the Northeast is people, I think, are probably more prepared to tolerate that infrastructure because they can see the benefit of it. Other parts of the country, which I won't mention, are less willing to tolerate the infrastructure that is required. They want the power, of course, and they like the fact that it's green, but they don't want the fact that actually you need cables onshore to deliver it to parts of the country where the power is needed. And it's a big, big challenge.
Can I just come in with a slightly different viewpoint with regards to planning? It goes back to what I said in the introduction about taking people with you on that journey and use real life examples. So I can use a real life example in County Durham back to the winter of 2021 and Storm Arwen. We can use real life examples of how our energy prices have gone up because we were so reliant on not having that within our control. And one of the things that I think we would really help local authorities is for the planning rules to reflect what we need going forward. So, for example, we have no authority and no planning law that can tell house builders that they have to put solar panels on. There's absolutely nothing. So there is no house builder going to put solar panels on that costs them more money to do that would have the energy capture that would make that house. I've had solar panels on my house for over 10 years. And I have a good reduction of the monthly bill that I save, and I get about £1,000 a year back in what goes back into the grid. Now, that will appeal to homeowners, especially in the current climate, but local authorities have no power whatsoever to ask for that to be part of the condition. So we've got a development about to happen in County Durham in a greenbelt area close to the city centre. Was very controversial. It should be an absolutely iconic development given where it is and given the amount of money that the builder can make. But there is no rules we can put in there at all to say that those houses have to be carbon neutral, because we don't have that within planning law. So they'll not do it. And we need some help from government with planning, with things like that we can do that to help for the future. So I get the whole big
But then
picture.
you've also then got to be careful, because again, talk about taking people along with you. You've then got to, one of the things that we're right in the midst of, right, politically, is, are we continuing on this journey, right? There is a group of people, and there are a group of politicians who are thinking, well, actually, it's not worth the cost, and the cost of living is going up, everything's costing more, all that kind of stuff is going on. And there's a group of people that want to blame net zero for that. That's what's costing your energy. It's all the green levies on your bills. If you didn't have those, everything would be cheaper. And if you're not careful, you start as a local council demanding that house builders do certain things. The cost of housing goes up. People can't buy houses. There's already a massive shortage of housing. So I'm not saying it. It's just that at different angles it becomes a very difficult place, because there's always somebody complaining. Somebody might like the solar panels on the house, but then you might have a 25-year-old who's got a job who can't afford the house because it's just put the cost of the house up.
So Amanda is right. It's not actually planning law that is your problem. It's building regulations law. It is actually changing, but the DLUC, the department responsible, are consulting shortly on what's called the Future Home Standard, which will come in from 2025. It doesn't specify solar panels. It's a performance-related standard, but it will effectively mean all new building from then on will be net zero compliant, will be carbon neutral. And absolutely accept the point. We probably should have done this a few years ago, but there were actually good reasons why they didn't at the time.
And Ruth, a lot of your members, maybe people sat in this room, we've heard from some saying, I'm hearing a lot of complaining, perhaps a lot of negativity around planning. Are you seeing practical pull-through where people are finding it easier?
No, I mean, we've just had a big delay to one of the DCOs in the cluster. I think one of the agencies has just changed their position, something they submitted before, just decided to change their position. It's delayed it to February. These are projects that we're trying to get final investment decision on next year. The uncertainty is really unhelpful. We've just got to remember what we're doing this for. We've got a target of 20 to 30 million tonnes that needs to be captured and stored by 2030. It's just one small wedge in all the abatement and emissions reductions that's got to happen across the economy. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it is a significant one. And the 8 projects that are now, a few of them delayed as a result of this, that are trying to get forward to commission in 2027 are only, they're less than a third of that. So we've got a lot more to do, and we're just not going fast enough. But I wanted to pick up on one of these points about really about taking people with you, because this is something that we're spending a lot more time on as a trade association, working with our members in different regions, working with different clusters to try to kind of have a dialogue around what is it that people are afraid of with these projects, what do they need to understand about the technology, about why we're doing it. And I think that's really, really important. And I also think the government are starting to do a bit more of that, and I would just really encourage them to do more of that and to try to lead some of that debate. Because actually, as you say, it's a false economy, this idea that if we don't invest today, things will be more expensive in the future. We'll be locked in to this expensive cycle of having to import everything from overseas at a higher cost and pay for others in other countries to build the decarbonisation infrastructure that we could have built here in order to keep producing stuff here. So it's just a false economy, and in the same way that people thought that offshore wind was going to be too expensive, but actually during the recent gas price crisis, offshore wind contracts for difference were paying back to the consumer and hedging some of those higher prices. So as you say, people don't understand this, they're not told it, they're not taught it, they're not given the material and information. But I actually find when you speak to people about it and when they understand it, they can see, well, then we should be doing more of that. That will save us in the future on our bills and so forth.
Well, absolutely agreed. You should be doing more of it, as long as it's not next to their house, usually.
Yeah, I mean, there is some of that, but I think, I mean, to be honest, it's probably different for us. A lot of what my members are doing is in industrial complexes already or in heavily industrialised regions. And I think, to be honest, there's a huge amount of work to do to decarbonise those areas and those regions, as you say, are normally...
Have the recent announcements on pylons and the community benefits prompted any discussions in the clusters?
I was talking to someone about this at dinner the other night, but I wouldn't say we've got, there's anything particular I can add on that. But I do think there's a concern that things won't go in the right direction. I think there's a concern that we need to see the whole picture in an area in terms of what does that whole ecosystem is probably the wrong word, but in the industrial sort of environment look like, as well as the communities that surround that are often where the people that work there live, and just making sure all of that develops in the right way, but really communicating the benefits and opportunities of that to people. And I just think that, again, I suppose when you talk about, we talked earlier about, we want to electrify as much as we can, but we've still got an awful lot of a need for liquid fuel and for high temperature production. And so, and possibly also the electricity system, the wires, the networks, they are not keeping up with what we're trying to do with offshore wind. So actually we should be making the most of our gas networks as well alongside that. But yeah, I think we need more of everything. So trying to perhaps pretend that we don't, or that we've got choices maybe that we don't have isn't helpful to people.
But there's also a major difference between, sorry Alex, there's a major difference when we talk about planning between kind of local planning, which like I say, I think is less of an issue, particularly in industrial areas who kind of are used to industry, so they just want it for the jobs if nothing else, and DCOs. DCOs are the main problem. And I've been saying for years, there is a way, particularly in places like the North East and the Humber and those industrial clusters, where I think you could give local power to determine DCOs locally, because actually I think DCOs slow down the decisions. Whereas, for example, if you look at NZT, the DCO's been going on for ages, been delayed a couple of months because the Environment Agency have thrown up some more nonsense. But it'll go through because it'll be fine, because they're doing everything as not even just by the book. They're going beyond the regulations actually to try and avoid a judicial review. We would have approved that 3 years ago if it was locally decided. But the DCOs perversely were there to stop local blockages and allow a national framework to take these investments through. In places like Teesside, it's done the opposite. It's actually slowed down the investment by going through that process. So if there are any civil servants in the room, take that away to see if there is a short circuit that could be used to allow local determination.
A good pivot to the room. So I think we've built up enough energy there to kind of get a lot of questions from the room.
I would like to comment, if I may.
Quick one, yes.
Yeah, well, everybody else has spoken at length. I actually agree with Amanda on solar, and I know that's just one element that we need to look forward to. And I know that it's not just about house builders who are building houses to sell, it's about people who are building social housing as well. And I know an example in Bellingham Town Centre, it was a two-part project. The first part of the project, it was being built by 13 homes, and they all had solar panels built into the roof. The second part of the project, also built by 13 homes, wasn't, because the housing authority, or the housing funding agency, wouldn't approve the expenditure. When that's a nonsense for me. We need to be able to knock that over. We've talked about planning, and I suppose one of the best examples of the lack of decision making or slow decision making is HS2. We saw a situation there because of all the objections over all the years. The length of tunnelling to be built for that particular project more than doubled. And that, of course, increased the cost tremendously. Why on earth can't we as a country start taking decisions that actually make things happen? We are so far, we started the project for HS2. Sadly, it's not going to continue, but we have a situation where similar projects on the continent, they're approved and they happen within a very, very short space of time. And we need to be able to do that as well. But it all boils down, at the end of the day, to government decision making, providing the right regulations, getting the right contracts, and providing that certainty. That's probably the most common word that's used to me by industrialists. We want certainty. They want certainty on investment and government decision making, and that's what we really must strive for.
No, really helpful, thank you, Alex. And great stat on HS2, I like that one. And did you know it's the biggest movement of Earth in Europe, apparently, HS2, for a single project? Didn't think we'd be discussing HS2 here. So we'll hand now to the room. We are 2/3 through, so we've got about 20 minutes left. So what we're going to do is we'll take questions in threes, and then we'll be able to jump round. So hands up, please, for questions. Got two over here. Feel like Fiona Bruce.
Thank you. I just coming on to what Alex mentioned earlier.
Can you say your name?
Sorry,
and where you're
Simon
from
Watson
first,
from
please?
Carbon. Just what Alex mentioned earlier. The region is decarbonising very well, should we say, but we're also deindustrialising. And the past year, we've seen the demise of two of the biggest industries in the region, and due to energy costs. One of them, Mitsubishi, had invested millions of pounds in the plant and never started it up, and now it's decommissioned it. Are we happy now then to import these critical goods into our country and be reliant on importing these goods from America instead of investing and producing the goods ourselves? Because we're becoming heavily reliant once again on imports of products in an industry which was highly paid and highly skilled that we've now lost. And just on Amanda as well, I agree with Amanda. Every new house should be built with solar panels. It doesn't make any sense that we're not doing that.
Perfect. Good first question, thank you. We've got a second one just behind the gentleman at Carlton. Oh no, we're going over here, are we, Miles? Right.
Sorry, hands.
Hand behind Carlton. Yeah.
Thanks very much. David Branson, Middlesbrough Council. A question I'd just like to ask the panel, and that is really about public transport. I just wonder what they would do to improve public transport in the Cleveland area, which I think at the moment is not in the best state it could be. If you've got any ideas how this could be done, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And then a third question.
Yeah, John Carr from the Association of Transport Coordinating Office. Yeah, John Carr from the involved in the heritage and tourism sectors. Levelling up, of course, is not only about levelling up the region, it's levelling up within the region as well. And the question I'd like to ask is, how does the panel view the readiness of the general population to accept that, to take advantage to all the things that we're hearing about in terms of hydrogen, cleaner power, etc., even better public transport. To take advantage of that, we really need to have equality of opportunity amongst the population, and we need to ensure that they have got access to get the appropriate skills.
Super.
So really summarise, it's going from a throwaway society to repair and mend society.
Good question, thank you. Amanda, I'm going to turn to you and we'll go in reverse if that's okay, please. So we've got three questions, one on essentially offshoring, the second one on transport, and the third one on the readiness of the population. We'll kick off with you, please, on population.
So I'm going to kick off with the readiness of the population and the culture and heritage, because within the new Combined Authority of the North East, I have the portfolio lead on culture, tourism, heritage, sport. And that is really important, and it's something we've embraced within County Durham in the last 2.5 years, is how we do culture-led regeneration and how we have that equality of opportunity for everybody, because it is a bit of a postcode lottery. And I think with devolution comes the education and skills, the adult skills funding, and that's really important because people in Westminster don't know what skills and what adult education we need here in the North East. We do, and that's really important. But what's also important is that nobody can do this in isolation. So I don't think there's ever been more of a time when we have to work collaboratively and in partnerships. So that is partnership of the public sector, the private sector, the charity sector, all of those people, because finances are scarce. We shouldn't have 6 different bodies all delivering the same service. And we shouldn't all think we can do everything, because we can't. Local government, national government aren't always the right deliverers for certain things. We do need other people to do that. So I think that opportunity that equality of opportunity for everyone is where the North East will thrive. Because, as I mentioned before, sadly, we have areas of the North East who top all the wrong polls, and we need to reverse that. We need to reverse that around deprivation, around poverty, around health. And if we can do that through regeneration, whether that's cultural, whether it's environmental, that's what we need to do. I can't really answer a lot about public transport in Teesside, but I can tell you a little bit of the North East. And again, what we're looking to do there is we need to look at a different way of operating public transport. And for us, we have a lot of rural areas. So a bus running empty all day is neither good for the community, the business who's running it, or the environment. So we're having a look at transport that's driven by requirements. So if we've got an area, a village out in the Dales where we need something, a bus might not be the best option, but actually a people carrier might be what we need to get them to connections where they can travel, public transport like that. Perfect. So led that way.
Good, yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Lord Callanan, I'll turn to you on offshoring, which I know is a huge topic that the government's interested in.
Okay, very good question. Effectively, carbon leakage is what you're talking about, and that's, for those who don't know, industries move away from a area which has carbon mitigation in place to an area that doesn't, and therefore can import the products cheaper, and we've seen it across a number of industries. So the EU have announced something called a carbon border adjustment mechanism, effectively a carbon tax at the borders, which they want to implement from 2026. And the data gathering period will be for 2 years before then. We consulted on it in the summer. It's not a straightforward policy area, very complicated to implement, and how do you judge the carbon content of a finished product, etc. It's something we're looking very closely at in government at the moment. It's the Treasury lead on it. I'm sure we'll want to do something in the area because it is becoming an increasing problem, and particularly as we decarbonise further and further. And we do that through the emissions trading scheme, through various other policies. So it becomes increasingly expensive to emit carbon within the UK, within the EU, and of course in many other parts of the globe it costs nothing at all. So how do we balance that within a context of free trade is a difficult policy area, but something we are looking quite closely at the moment. You'll see announcements on that in the near future.
Thank you. Let's take another round of questions. I know we'll then get to Ruth and Ben. So we've got one over here.
Hi, Eric Adams from Carlton Power rather than Carlton Carbon, although we are.
Double trouble from
so we're developing a number of green hydrogen projects, which we hope will be successful in the first allocation round. I think just an observation, I think it's important that a lot of the focus today has been on heavy industry. 50% of the emissions in the UK from industry come from outside the heavy industrial areas. And to Amanda's point about, there are industries within other parts of the North East which absolutely need the tools and the mechanisms to decarbonise. And I'd just like, I guess, a comment in terms of how the panel sees that happening.
Great, thank you. So a good one for Ruth when we get round. Second question at the front here, Miles.
Hi, Patrick Craven from City and Guilds, and I think just one very quick observation. I think something that came out of both party conferences this year was about policy certainty. And I think to your point, Lord Houchen, how that's backed up with trust and confidence for investors. I mean, that's a basic, I think, in terms of trying to get that investment. I guess my observation over the day is, and it was touched on with the observations about collaboration and industrial strategy, is there a role for us kind of a regional umbrella that brings all of these various investments together and says, what would a kind of a skills map look like for all of those things across the time frame that says, well, actually, initially it might be heavily reliant on groundworks and construction, and then it moves into some other sets of skills that you need, and sort of defining it that way, almost more than thinking about whether it's green jobs or great jobs or whatever. What's the skills framework that's needed for the region collectively over a period of time?
Fantastic, thanks. So a good one for Ben shortly. And then the lady over here, please.
Thank you. Just to build on previous conversations about skills and equality of opportunity, there are clearly going to be lots of what were described as great jobs earlier on this afternoon, well paid, skilled, that have longevity. The issue is the energy sector is predominantly male-dominated. There's not very many women working in it at all. And it's not alone in that. That's also true of the construction sector, of IT, of quite a lot of sectors that as a region we're looking to for all the good new jobs that are going to come in and boost the economy. So my question, I guess, really is to Amanda, but also to Ben as well. What are the combined authorities going to be able to do to create meaningful, robust pathways for women and girls to move into those sectors? And just bearing in mind, it was Equal Pay Day yesterday, which is the day that women, to all intents and purposes, stop getting paid because of the gender pay gap. Thank you.
Very important question. Thank you. So, Ben, I think we can take two in there for you around a regional umbrella, which I think is something you'll be very familiar with, and then secondly, skills.
Yeah, well, I think they're both linking to each other directly, don't they? So we've started. So I think you've got to start on the first question, just to touch upon it because it goes into skills. You've got to start with the low-hanging fruit, which is what the industrial clusters are, right? So you're not going to start decarbonising rural villages in North Yorkshire because the cost of doing that is so much more difficult when you're trying to test the technology. And we've kind of followed the same kind of theory when it comes to skills. So devolution helps massively. So rather than the Learning and Skills Council handing out money to various institutes, public and private, for their annual allocation, which is a very kind of rigid and inaccurate way of funding education more generally, we have the devolved funding for adult education. It's about £35 million a year that we have. And when we inherited that 3-4 years ago, by the time it got up and running, we had, I think it was 380 different providers of education across Teesside, Darlington and Hartlepool, from all four corners of the country. We weren't really sure what they were doing because it was a cut and paste in effect from the Learning and Skills Council. 4 years on, we have 24 providers. We just got rid of loads of them that were just wasting a huge amount of money. We're delivering the exact same educational outcomes, but we're doing it for £8 million a year less. So the £8 million of headroom that we've now got, because we're still getting the allocation from government, is devolved to us to use for educational purposes, for adult educational purposes. And that allows us to be a lot more hands-on with trying to attract investors. So the low-hanging fruit for that kind of thing is Sea Wind. They need just over 1,000 direct employees within their facility. And they know, because they're halfway through building the thing, they know how many receptionists they need, lawyers, accountants, welders, electricians. They know it. And they also have the profile for when they come online. So they'll ramp up to that kind of 1,200 jobs over kind of a 2-year period. What we're able to do is say, well, give us that. We will fully fund those courses for either retraining of adults looking to get into a new industry or reskill for a new opportunity, or people coming into colleges and then into kind of post kind of 18 skills. And we'll do that. We will then go and commission those courses, and we will overtrain people, and then we will just provide a conveyor belt of people that you can then interview to either employ or not employ. And Cllr, for example, now have formal relationships with Redcar College and Hartlepool College in particular. They're exploring one with Stockton. And that's working extremely well. We've actually done it in a separate industry with Amazon. We've actually set up a relationship with Darlington Economic Campus as well, where we're doing a graduate level version of that, working with universities. So it's quite straightforward when you're doing a big investor kind of single. The challenge of what we're trying to do now is how do we apply that across an industry? So the problem we have is there are smaller supply chain businesses who are worried about losing senior talent because they'll probably be able to get a couple of quid more or a few quid more going to work for Cllr. So there's a shortage within industry. So how do you take that model where you can bring together the supply chain and understand how many welders do you need? But it's not just how many welders do you need. There are different types of welding and different levels of it. And how do we take a portfolio effect on a regional supply chain basis, and then again, using the money that has been devolved to us, go and start actively commissioning courses, overtrain, knowing that some are going to end up with Cllr, some will end up with NZT, some will end up with BP, some will end up with the supply chain. We haven't quite got the answer yet. We're kind of fiddling around the edges about how that might actually work in practice. But I think that's how you crack it. And I think you can only really do that with devolution because the rules around the Learning and Skills Council just are not fit for purpose, because with the greatest respect to well-intentioned local colleges, the way that the funding is set up is just to put bums on seats. And they might say that they're really interested in outcomes for local kids in the local area. And I believe on a one-to-one level that's true, but the system doesn't allow them to do that. But with devolution, it does. And where we would like to go, and I think DfE are in a pretty draconian department. I mean, they don't like devolution, and we don't really get anywhere with proper devolution. We should be devolving post-16, because if you can get post-16 in FE through to adult education, and you can then start to take really control of local colleges and local private providers' budgets on an annual basis, then you can drive the local economic industrial strategy that we have in Teesside and match up the skills. At the minute, we've got the strategy, but we don't have full control over matching the skills because the drivers for the colleges and the private providers are different from where the economy is going. So half an answer for you. But then, again, just very quickly to segue into the third question that was asked, we are seeing a raising of a profile of the region around these types of industries and promoting women and other minorities as part of those opportunities. For example, the first recruit by BP for the Net Zero Teesside project as an apprentice was a young girl who came to the opening. She was the first one to be recruited until she'd heard of the opportunity, and BP have actually done some fantastic stuff going into colleges and talking about access to women in engineering. She was going to go and do a drama course, which is fine, great. Lots of people do well in drama courses, but she completely changed her mind because she recognised opportunity on her doorstep. So a big thing for us is that brain drain, keeping people within the region, not feeling like people have to move for a job, but also people coming in, these businesses actively coming in and saying, actually, we're trying to recruit women, we're trying to recruit minorities as well. And she felt like this is an opportunity for her, and she took it. She's now been recruited. Apparently, she's doing fantastically well at Hartlepool College. So I think we will naturally see a shift. There's always more that can be done, but we're already seeing that shift, also largely because of the socioeconomic responsibility that these investors recognise as well, either through local content, through subcontracting to local supply chains, but also they recognise their wider social responsibilities, which is good to see in practice, right, rather than just saying it.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. So we've got a couple of minutes left, but I want to turn to Amanda because you'll have some thoughts on skills.
Just to pick up on that, because I have the skills agenda on our LEP as well. And getting women and girls, and we also in County Durham, we have a subsidiary of the council called Business Durham, which I chair, and I've actually been there, chaired that Business Durham meeting this morning. And we have lots of SMEs who we are working with our education providers, because what we need to do is, it's no good post-18. We need to get in at that early stage. And we are working with, I don't know if anyone knows Tanya Cooper from Steelbenders. She's part of that. That's a Teesside-based organisation, but she sits on Business Durham as well. And we're looking to set up something where we go into the year 5 and 6 in primary school, so that we give these ideas of what jobs are out there for girls, because it is still stereotyped. And one of the best examples I've seen is Hitachi. And when they opened in Newton Aycliffe, and one of the examples is a lady who I met who was a hairdresser. And they employed quite a few hairdressers to wire the trains, because the dexterity they have in their fingers, you can't be taught that. It was natural from what they were doing, and they had no idea that they could transfer those skills. So it's not just about young people and getting in there, it's about how we look at people who are already in work and who want to retrain and reskill. And just for that, women aren't the minority. Well, actually,
women and minorities.
No, yeah, but we're not a minority. We're actually majority now in the country. We are a minority in some industries, and the UTC at Newton Aycliffe, that college is really good, where it takes young people from 14 to 18, and they don't do a school day. They don't do 9 till 3:30. They do 8 till 5, and they go out into the work environment and they do that training. And there's quite a lot of young girls going there now who are going into STEM industries. And we know that that's the future. I've sat listening to people this morning who can't get recruits, can't find apprentices. But we need to let people know that those jobs are there. And if we don't get that careers advice, and we don't get that into people at an early age, that these are the jobs of the future, these are the jobs and what qualifications you need to do to get them, then we will just continue having the same problems.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna. So we literally have 1 minute left. So I'm going to go through the whole panel, if that's okay. And you've got to summarise the one key ask or wish for this region. And your question from Ceres, by the way, I know that Ruth will be happy to take that afterwards about the pipelines going inland. However much we love talking about pipelines, even I'm saying we haven't got time to talk about pipelines. So your one wish or ask for the region, going to start with you, Ben.
Just the acceleration of regulatory certainty.
Interesting. Alex?
I agree with that, and may I apologise to people
Not
present.
at all.
There's been a development in my little local issue, and I had to make the call straight away.
Well, thank you for coming back.
But you know, I agree with Ben that we actually need that certainty. I would add quicker government decision making.
Fantastic. Ruth?
Well, I would echo that and then just add for longer term planning, actually. So we're talking about planning approval, but just a longer term plan for the infrastructure development in the region, particularly CO2 and hydrogen networks.
Stay clear, thank you. Amanda, you're not allowed to agree.
What I'm going to say then is I don't disagree with anything that's been said. However, I would put in a request that government works with local government, works with the devolved powers and gives us the tools to be able to deliver, because we can't do it with one hand tied behind our back, whether that's regulation or whether it's funding. So we do need that.
Thank you. Very clear. And Lord Callanan?
I think it's my job to try and deliver that regulatory certainty and my little small way. The regulatory certainty, which we will do, and faster decision making is the bane of my life. I can assure you I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible. There are lots of constraints even on us as ministers. Trust me, we try to make the decisions as quickly as possible and overcome all of the bureaucratic obstacles that are in place.
Thank you very much. Well, that's been a fantastic panel, so please bring your hands together.